Welcome back to this channel. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through how we can implement slowly changing dimension type 2 or SCD type 2 in Microsoft Fabric using notebooks. Now, if you've ever worked with customers' data, you will know that people change over time. They move to a new city, update their email address, or change their names. And if we want to do proper analytics, we can't just overwrite those changes. We want to keep the history so that we can always look back and see what was true at the time of a transaction. That's exactly what SCD Type 2 helps us to solve. It allows us to preserve the full history of changes in our dimension tables while still maintaining ability to link facts like sales to the correct version of the customer records. In today's session, I will take you step by step from preparing the initial and change data to building a staging table to creating the SCD Type 2 dimension. And finally, we're going to join with the fact table so that we can see how the history plays out in a real analytics using the medallion architecture. So let's jump in and get started with the implementation. I'm going to walk you through this solution in a more detailed manner. So let's say the fabric lakehouse and a notebook in my data engineering workspace. So I'm going to come here and I've got this SCD folder that houses my notebook and the lakehouse. So I'm going to go into the lakehouse and I've got this file store and I've got this directory that contains the fact cells. Let's take a look at the fact cells. I'm going to turn this to a table view and you observe we've got the order date, order ID, customer ID, product, quantity, and the unit. I'm going to go back and then we've got the customers initial large.csv. So this actually track the initial record of all our customers. Let's see this in a table view and then we can turn this header on. So basically we have this list of customers with the ID, the name, email address, city, and postcode. Now you observe that we have this customer named, for example, Bob Jones. This person lives in Manchester City. I'm going to go back to the customers change large.csv. So this is going to be the changed customer record. And let's see this also in a table view. And you observe that the same customer named Bob Jones moved from Manchester to Liverpool, and this is the new current postal code. And of course, we can see the effective date for this movement. Now, I'm going to be understanding all of this in the solution. So the first thing I did is to create my notebook from this lakehouse, and of course, I've got that here. Now, in the notebook, we're first creating three schemas, the bronze, silver, and the gold layers, and this follows the medallion architecture. So I'm going to run the cell to create the three schemas. The three schemas are now created. I'm going to come here and I'm going to right click and refresh the table. We can see the bronze, silver, and the gold, including the default DBO schema. Now, in the next cell at the bottom, we are basically reading all the files from the file store into the bronze schema, which is going to be where our data will be as they are without any transformation. So this is what I've done. I'm going to double click and I can see all the three files, the fact sales large.csv, customers initial large.csv, and the customers changes large.csv. So I'm going to close this for now. And basically, in this case, I'm using the PySpark language using this percent PySpark magic command, and I'm creating a variable here, df underscore fact sales, and I'm using a spark.read.format, and my format is CSV, and I'm using the option to specify the header, and of course I'm using the load method to load from the ABFS path. To get this, you need to come here and then you need to right click and copy the ABFS path and then just paste in here. So after pasting that, we proceed to write this data into a delta table named fact sales, and it's going to be stored in the bronze schema of the SCD underscore LH lakehouse. So I've done the same thing for the customer initial data and the customer's current data. So I'm going to proceed to run this to read all the files from the file store and write into the bronze schema as delta tables. I'm going to press Ctrl Enter. this executed successfully. And I'm going to come here and I'm going to refresh the bronze schema, and I can see the three tables. When I expand the fact sales, we can see the columns, and these are by default string because they're coming from the CSV file. So these are delta tables. Now I'm going to minimize these and let's go down to the cell at the bottom. So in this case, I am preparing my customer data before I actually build the history tracking logic. So you observe that our data, as we've read from the files, are string. We have the ABC and ABC. So in this case, I'm using the cast function to clean the data from the string to appropriate data type. So I'm actually, for this time, in this case, casting this as an int, and of course, I'm casting this name as a string, and we have the same thing for the others. Now, the most important part of this data cleaning is this effective date alias, and I'm storing this 1st of August 2025. So in this case, I'm actually assigning this specific date value to every customer record. This becomes my baseline start date, meaning all of the initial customer are considered valid starting from this point in time. So I'm going to go ahead and get this from the intermediate schema, which is the bronze dot customers underscore initials. So I'm going to proceed to press Ctrl Enter to run the cell. All right, so this succeeded. Now I'm going to minimize this and I'm going to refresh the schema, that is the silver, and then we can see the customers underscore initial fix. Now I'm going to scroll onto the bottom, and then we have this part. So this is one for the customer changes file. Again, you can see that I'm enforcing the data types where I'm actually casting from the string to the appropriate data types. And of course, in this case, I've got this effective date that is already part of the data. So this simply means each row has its own effective date, which tells me exactly when that change took effect. For example, maybe a customer updated their city on the 1st of September or their email address on the 15th of October. So I'm going to proceed again to get this from the bronze dot customers underscore changes delta table. So I'm going to press Ctrl Enter to run the cell. All right, so this executed successfully. And I'm going to come back again, refresh the silver schema, and then we have both of them. So one is for the initial fixed and the second is for the customers change cast. Now let's just query this table and say the content. I'm going to just create a new cell and let's write a simple select star from. I'm going to start off with the first one at the top. I can copy the name of the schema and the name of the table, and I'm going to Control V to paste, and I'm going to press Ctrl Enter to run. So in this case, we have all the customer ID, name, email, city, postcode, and we have this effective date that was specified, that is the 1st of August 2025. Now let's see the second, which is the customers changes cast. I'm going to copy this and I can get rid of these and Ctrl V, press Ctrl Enter to run the cell. So in this case, we can see all the effective dates which are coming from the customers change file that we are tracking. So we have Bob Jones, and the effective date that we have on record is on the 10th of September 2025 when he started living in Liverpool City from Manchester, and so on. So this is how it looks like. Now I'm going to go to the bottom and we have the data cleaning for the fact sales. So I'm creating this delta table and this is named as fact underscore sales, and I'm using the select to perform the data cleaning by using the toDate function to transform this to a specific date format, which I love to work with. And then we are casting the order ID, customer ID, and so on and so forth from the string to the integer data types, because we have to do all of this for the data coming from the CSV files. So I'm going to proceed to press Ctrl Enter to create this silver dot fact underscore sales table. This succeeded. Now I'm going to come again. I'm going to right click and refresh And there we go. We have the fact cells. When I expand, we can see we've transformed the order date from the string to date format, and we've got the order ID, custom ID, which are text initially to the appropriate int data types, and then we maintain this as text, and then we've got the quantity and unit price as int data types formatted. So that's nice. Now I'm going to go down to the bottom. Now that I have my initial customers and my customer changes prepared, the next step is to bring them together into a single staging table. And that's exactly what I'm going to be using this code to do. So in this case, you observe that I'm actually combining the two data sets, that is the customer's initial fix, and I'm using the union all to union that with the customers underscore change cast. This gives me a single data set that has both the baseline customers and all of their updates. And next, I'm selecting all the columns or the attributes that we care about, such as the customer ID, name, email, city, postcode, and of course the effective date. And you will notice that I've got this hash diff. This is really important in SCD Type 2. What I'm doing here is basically generating a SHA-256 hash based on all the key attributes of the customer record. Basically, I'm concatenating all the values of the customer ID, name, email, city, and postal code, and then applying the SHA-2 function. Why am I doing this? Because it gives me a fingerprint of the row. Simply means if any of those field changes in the future, even a single letter in the email or city, the hash value will be completely different. This makes it super easy to detect changes later when I build this SCD logic instead of comparing every column one after the other. So I'm going to proceed to run this cell by pressing Ctrl Enter. Again, this executed successfully. And I'm going to come back here and refresh the silver schema, and then we have the customers underscore stage delta table. Now that I've got my staging table with both the initial customers and their changes, I can finally build my dimension table with the full SCD Type 2 structure. And I'm going to use the code at the bottom to achieve that. So you will notice we are also creating a table named dim customer in the gold layer, and this is where I'm going to store my dimension data with the SCD Type 2 logic applied. So the very first column is the customer SK, which is the surrogate key generated using monotonically increasing ID function. And this gives me a unique identifier for each version of the customer record, separate from the natural customer ID. And then I'm going to use that to bring all the customer attributes. I've got a customer ID, name, email, city, postal code, and of course the effective date. And you also notice that I'm using this window function with lead here to calculate the end date based on what you can see here. So first, each customer, I'm ordering that using the effective date, and then I look ahead to the next record's effective date. Then the end date of the customer record is 1 day before the next record, as you can see based on this minus interval 1 day specified here. So this simply means if there's no record, I just use a file feature date, that is the 999 12th 31st, which represents a still valid. Finally, I'm adding the is current flag, as you can see based on this case statement here. So this simply means if there's no record for a customer, that means this is the latest record. So this is going to be marked as true, as you can see here. Otherwise, it's going to be a older record, and this is going to be marked as false. So I'm going to proceed to run this logic to create the SCD Type 2, and let's see the results. And by the way, you can see we're also getting this from the intermediate silver dot customer stage we created. So this succeeded, and I'm going to come to the gold and refresh. And when I click on this, we can see the dim customers. Excellent. So I'm going to create a new cell, and let me just copy this so that we can see how it looks like. So Control C, and let's write a simple select star from gold underscore dim customers and press Ctrl Enter. Okay, cool. So we have the customer SK, that is the surrogate key, we have the customer ID, which is the natural key, we have the name, email, and so on and so forth. And then you observe the effective date here. So, for example, this customer, Bob Jones, was initially living in Manchester City, and this is the postal code, and the effective date where we're tracking this is on the 1st of August 2025, as we specified at the top. And then this ends on the 9th of September 2025, and this return is current false. And they can see this is where this customer is actually living currently, Liverpool, and you can see this returned through. And the same thing applies to Emma Davis. So Emma is actually was living in Bristol initially, and this was false. And Emma Davis is now living in Cardiff City, and this is true. So our logic is actually working absolutely awesome. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. Now that I've built my SCD Type 2 dimension table, the next step is to link it to my fact sales so that I can do proper historical analysis. And that's what I'm going to be using this code at the bottom to do. So in this case, I'm creating this fact sales, and this is going to be stored in the gold schema, and I'm selecting the attributes that is really important to us. So we have the order ID, alias as S, order date, customer SK, surrogate key, product quantity, unit, and then we are calculating the sales amount by multiplying the quantity by the price, and this is going to be coming from the intermediate schema, that is the silver dot fact sales, and then we are performing an inner join that with the gold dot the customers, and then we are joining based on this key. And then we can also see that we've got this and condition where the order date is between the effective date and the end date. So I'm going to proceed to run this, and this executed successfully. I'm going to come to the gold schema, right click, refresh, and then we can see the fact sales. Now let's quickly just query this and see how it looks like. So select start from gold dot fact underscore sales and press Control Enter. All right, so we have the order ID, order date, customer SK, surrogate key, the product quantity, the price, and this sales amount. So the final thing we want to do is to calculate the sales based on the historical record and the current record. So in this case, we are selecting the customer ID, the name, the city, and then we are summing the sales amount, and it's going to be known as total revenue. And then it's going to come from the gold.fact underscore sales, and then we are performing the inner join, joining that with the gold.dim customers, and then we are performing the joining based on the customer SK surrogate key and the customer SK surrogate key, and then we are performing the group by based on the column selected at the top, and then we are ordering by the customer ID and the effective date. So this is going to show us the transaction that we generated for customers who were living in one location and who are living in a new location. So I'm going to press Ctrl Enter to run the cell, and let's see the result. Amazing. So this is now the final result. So let's just pay attention to the most important. So you observe that Bob Jones was initially living in the city of Manchester, and we can see the effective date that we started tracking this record. So the total number of revenue or the sales we generated from this customer is 99 when he was living in Manchester. And we can see that when he moved from Manchester to Liverpool City, we can see that we've generated a even better amount of sales of 1,039, which is really fantastic. So this simply means that maybe this customer is actually earning more money or is doing very well in the city, in Liverpool City compared to Manchester City, or we're giving more incentives that's actually bringing this kind of revenue, or we're doing something special in Liverpool City for this customer that we are not doing in Manchester City. So that is how we can perform this kind of historical analysis. And let's just take one before we wrap up. So you also notice that Emma Davis, living in Bristol City, returned a total of 57 total revenue based on transaction. And then when Emma moved to Cardiff, we are now generating 250 worth of sales volumes or revenue from this customer. And The same thing probably applies to this customer. We have the Frank Wilson living in Sheffield, and this person moved to London. So you discover that we're actually getting more money from this customer when he was living in Sheffield compared to when he now moved to London. So this is how we can implement the slowly changing dimension type tool in a real business scenario using Microsoft Fabric Notebook. I hope you understood this and you've enjoyed the tutorial. If you do, please like, share this video, comment, and follow me for more videos. There is a lot to come. Thank you and bye for now. Cheers.